The alarm bells rang through the command center on Earth's orbital station. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the urgent message came through the deep space communication array. The signal was weak and broken, coming from somewhere far beyond the known trade routes. Jake put down his coffee cup and walked to the main display screen. The message was playing on repeat, and each time it got a little clearer as the computers worked to clean up the static and interference. "This is Defense Commander Zethka of Calrion Prime," the voice said through crackling interference. "We are under attack by the Vorthak Horde. Our defenses are failing. Repeat, this is an emergency request for immediate assistance. Civilian casualties are massive. We have children and elderly trapped in the underground shelters. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need help." The message cut to static, then started again from the beginning. Jake listened to it 3 more times, his face getting more serious with each replay. He had heard of the Calrians before. They were one of the tougher species in the galaxy, what everyone called Death Worlders. Their home planet was so dangerous that most other aliens could not even visit it without special equipment. If the Calrians were calling for help, things had to be really bad. Jake called his second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Harper, to the briefing room. Lisa was one of the best tactical officers in the human fleet, and she had a sharp mind for military strategy. When she arrived, Jake played the message for her. "How far is Calrion Prime from here?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her datapad. "About 3 weeks travel time at maximum speed. But, Captain, there's something else you should know about this situation." She pulled up a holographic display showing the Calrian system and the surrounding space. Red markers indicated hostile forces. "The Vorthak Horde isn't just some pirate group," Lisa explained. "They're a nomadic species that travels from world to world, stripping planets of all resources. They don't just steal things and leave. They consume everything. When they're done with a planet, it's nothing but a dead rock floating in space." Jake studied the display. The red markers showed a massive fleet surrounding Calrion Prime. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Intelligence. Reports suggest at least 15 heavy cruisers, plus support vessels. Each cruiser is about the size of a small city. They're not just ships, Captain. They're living creatures that have been bred and modified for warfare." Jake nodded slowly. "The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most dangerous threats to peaceful civilizations. They had destroyed dozens of worlds over the past century, and no one had been able to stop them effectively." "What about the Galactic Council?" Jake asked. "Are they sending any assistance?" Lisa shook her head. "The Council is tied up in committee meetings and diplomatic negotiations. They're talking about economic sanctions and formal protests. Meanwhile, the Calrians are dying." Jake felt his anger rising. This was exactly the kind of bureaucratic nonsense that drove him crazy about galactic politics. While politicians talked and debated, real people were suffering and dying. "Sir," Lisa continued, "there's something else. Earth Command has been monitoring this situation for the past 48 hours. They want to send a response." "Good," Jake said. "What kind of relief mission are they planning? Medical ships? Evacuation transports?" Lisa looked at him with a slight smile. "Actually, Captain, they want to send you." Jake was confused for a moment. "Me? What do you mean, me?" "They want to send the Reaper, sir. Your ship. They're not planning a relief mission." Now Jake understood, and he felt a grim satisfaction spreading through his chest. The UFS Reaper was not a hospital ship or a transport vessel. She was a warship, pure and simple. Every weapon system, every piece of armor, every tactical system was designed for one purpose: to find enemy ships and destroy them completely. "They want us to deal with the Vorthak directly," Jake said. "Yes, sir. Earth Command believes that the best way to help the Calrians is to eliminate the threat that's attacking them." Jake walked over to the window and looked out at his ship. The Reaper was docked at the orbital shipyard, getting her final preparations for departure. She was not a beautiful ship by galactic standards, Most alien vessels were smooth and elegant, designed to look peaceful and diplomatic. The Reaper looked like exactly what she was, a predator. Her hull was dark gray, almost black, with sharp angles that helped deflect enemy sensors. Weapon ports lined her sides like the teeth of some massive beast. Her engines were oversized, giving her speed and maneuverability that most ships her size could not match. "How long until we can depart?" Jake asked. "The ship will be ready in 6 hours, Captain. The crew is already being recalled from shore leave." Jake thought about the message from Calrian Prime. Children and elderly people trapped in underground shelters. An entire civilization facing extinction. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, a fleet of living ships that existed only to consume and destroy. "Lisa, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we accept the mission. Then contact the crew, chiefs, and tell them I want the Reaper ready for departure in 4 hours, not 6. "Sir, what about the Galactic Council? They'll want to know about our response." Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "The Council asked for humanitarian assistance. They assumed we would send medical supplies and refugee ships. They don't understand humanity yet." He turned back to face Lisa, his eyes hard with determination. "When someone calls for help, we don't just send aid. We eliminate the threat." Lisa nodded, understanding completely. This was why she had requested assignment to the Reaper. While other human ships carried scientists and diplomats, the Reaper carried warriors. Every member of her crew had volunteered for the most dangerous missions humanity could offer. "I'll start preparing the tactical briefings," Lisa said. "The crew will want to know what they're up against." "Good. And Lisa?" Jake called as she reached the door. "Yes, Captain? Make sure everyone understands what we're going to do. We're not going to Calrion Prime to evacuate refugees or provide medical care. We're going there to send a message to every predator species in the galaxy." "What message is that, sir?" Jake looked back out at his ship, his expression grim and determined. "That when peaceful people call for help, humanity answers. And we don't just bring aid ships. We bring something much more dangerous. The Reaper would launch in 4 hours, carrying death to those who threatened the innocent." The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided that a threat needed to be eliminated. The first ship materialized between Mars and Jupiter like a mountain appearing out of thin air. It was massive, angular, and covered in dark metal that seemed to drink in the starlight. The alien sensors had shown nothing there moments before. But now a vessel nearly 2 kilometers long hung in space where empty void had been. Admiral Kethvar stared at the main display screen, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. His 4 hands gripped the crystal railing so tightly that small cracks appeared in the material. "Report!" he demanded, his musical voice strained with stress. Sensor operator Vex Carr worked frantically at his station. "Admiral, the vessel just appeared. No hyperspace signature, no energy buildup. It was just suddenly there." Before the Admiral could respond, another ship decloaked near Saturn. Then another appeared near Jupiter's moons. Within minutes, the human solar system was filled with massive warships that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian vessels. Sub-Commander Yixtal counted the new contacts on her tactical display. 43 ships, Admiral, all of them larger than our flagship. The biggest one is showing as 2.1 kilometers in length. Kethvar felt his world collapsing around him. In 60 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The intelligence reports had been completely wrong. The humans were not a primitive species with a handful of patrol boats. They had a battle fleet that could challenge the Empire itself. "How is this possible?" he whispered. On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Captain Morrison watched the alien fleet's formation begin to waver as the hidden human ships revealed themselves. The Zephyrian vessels, which had moved with perfect military precision just moments before, now seemed confused and uncertain. "Captain," reported Communications Officer Hayes, Admiral Carter is requesting permission to address the alien fleet. Put her through, Morrison replied. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice filled the communication channels of both fleets. Her tone was calm and professional, but there was steel underneath the words. Admiral Kethvar, this is Admiral Lisa Carter of the Terran Defense Force. You are now surrounded and outgunned. I strongly recommend you halt your advance and consider withdrawing from our solar system. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethvar received that transmission like a physical blow. Surrounded. The word echoed in his mind as he looked at the tactical display. Red symbols representing human warships had appeared throughout the solar system. His fleet was indeed surrounded. Admiral, Vexkar called out, his voice shaking. I'm reading massive weapons arrays on all the human vessels. Energy signatures, unlike anything in our databases. Kethvar activated his communication system. Admiral Carter, I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. How did you hide such a large fleet from our sensors? Carter's response came quickly. Admiral, humanity learned long ago that the galaxy can be a dangerous place. We have spent the last century preparing for the day when someone would come to our home and demand our surrender. The alien admiral looked around his command center. His crew stared back at him with expressions of fear and confusion. These were experienced warriors who had conquered star systems, but none of them had ever faced a situation like this. Sub-Commander, Kethvar said quietly, what is our tactical assessment? Yixtal checked her displays before answering. Admiral, we are outnumbered and outgunned. The human ships are larger than ours and appear to be heavily armed. If they have technology advanced enough to hide entire fleets from our sensors, we must assume their weapons are equally advanced. Captain Morrison's voice joined the conversation. Admiral Kethvar, you asked how we hid our ships. The answer is simple. We've been watching the galaxy for a long time. We knew that eventually someone would come to Earth with demands like yours. Morrison paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. 50 years ago, we started building these ships in secret. Hidden shipyards in asteroid belts, weapons research facilities on the dark sides of moons, defense platforms disguised as mining stations. The human captain's voice took on a harder edge. We studied every alien signal we could intercept. We learned about the Crimson Horde and the Machine Collective and all the other threats you mentioned. And we decided that if the galaxy was truly that dangerous, we needed to be ready. Admiral Kethvar felt something he had not experienced since his youth. Pure, overwhelming fear. The humans had not just hidden their ships. They had been planning for this encounter for decades. Everything about their apparent weakness had been carefully designed to make potential enemies underestimate them. Admiral Carter, Kethvar said, trying to keep his voice steady. Perhaps we can negotiate a peaceful resolution to this situation. I'm listening, Carter replied. As the two admirals began their careful diplomatic dance, the massive human warship, USS Defiance, moved into position directly in front of the Zephyrian flagship. The human vessel was 1.5 kilometers long, its dark hull covered with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Along its sides, smaller ships detached like deadly insects, leaving their nest. Lieutenant Hayes looked up from his communication station aboard the Liberty. Captain, I'm counting over 300 fighter craft launching from the Defiance alone. Morrison nodded. Each of those fighters was probably larger than his entire ship. The human military had not just built big ships. They had built an entire secret navy complete with support craft, logistics vessels, and weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Admiral Kethvar watched the swarm of human fighters deploy around his fleet. Each small craft moved with precision and purpose, taking up positions that would allow them to attack from multiple angles. These were not the clumsy maneuvers of a primitive species. These were the tactics of experienced warriors. Admiral, Sub-Commander Yixtal said quietly, our weapons are powered and ready, but I do not recommend engaging. We would be destroyed within minutes. Kethvar looked at the tactical display one more time. 47 Zephyrian warships that had seemed so powerful when they entered this system were now trapped like insects in a web. The humans had revealed their true nature, and it was terrifying. For the first time in the history of the Zephyrian Empire, one of their fleets was completely outmatched. "Admiral Carter," Kethvar said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are your terms?" "Simple," Carter replied. "You leave our solar system immediately. You report back to your empire that humanity is not interested in becoming a client species, and you make sure that no one else comes here with demands like yours." Captain Morrison's voice added the final warning. "Admiral, humanity has been preparing for galactic contact for 50 years. We hoped for peace, but we prepared for war. Today, you've seen what we built in case someone threatened our home." Morrison paused, letting the weight of his words settle over both fleets. "We are not the primitive species you thought you were dealing with. We are not helpless, and we are not afraid." In the silence that followed, 47 alien warships that had conquered star systems found themselves unable to move. The hunters had become the hunted, and for the first time, the Zephyrian Empire faced a species that was more dangerous than they were. Admiral Kethvar looked at the massive human warships surrounding his fleet and realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. Humanity had announced its presence not as a weak species seeking protection, but as apex predators who had been quietly waiting for someone to threaten their home. And in that moment, the alien admiral understood what humans meant when they said they came in peace but were prepared for war. Admiral Kethvar returned to his flagship with a feeling he had not experienced in many years: confusion. In his long military career, he had dealt with dozens of different species. Some were proud, others were clever, a few were brave. But all of them had eventually accepted reality when faced with overwhelming force. The humans were different. Captain Morrison had looked directly at him and refused the Empire's protection, even after seeing the evidence of what happened to species who remained unprotected in the galaxy. It made no sense. Sub-Commander Yixtal was waiting for him in the main command center of the flagship. Her purple scales had turned darker, a sign of stress among her people. She had been monitoring communications from the human homeworld while he was at the meeting. "Admiral, what was their response?" she asked. "They declined our offer," Kethvar replied, settling into his command chair. The chair was made of the same crystal material as the ship's hull, and it adjusted automatically to support his large frame. Yixtal's 4 eyes widened in surprise. "They refused? Even after you explained the consequences?" "Yes." The human captain seemed to understand our capabilities perfectly, but he still said no. Kethvar activated the main display screen and called up tactical information about the human solar system. The small human ships were still in defensive positions around their homeworld. Their largest vessel, something called the USS Defender, was barely half the size of his smallest escort ship. "Perhaps they need a demonstration," Yixtal suggested. "The Kralliks changed their minds very quickly after we destroyed one of their cities." The Admiral considered this. The Kralliks had been a proud warrior race that had initially refused the Empire's protection. One precisely targeted strike on a military installation had convinced them that resistance was pointless. Within hours, they had accepted client species. "Status. Signal the fleet," Kethvar ordered. "We advance toward the human homeworld, full battle formation. We will disable their orbital installations first. When they see their defenses falling, they will reconsider." 24 hours later, the Zephyrian Third Fleet began moving toward Earth. Their crystal hulls caught and reflected the light from Sul, turning the alien armada into a river of rainbow fire flowing through space. Each ship moved with perfect precision, maintaining formation as they had practiced for decades. On Earth, President Chen Wei watched the alien fleet approach on the main screen in the emergency command center. The facility was buried deep under the Rocky Mountains, designed to survive even nuclear war. Now it housed the leaders who would either save humanity or watch it fall. "How long until they reach Earth?" the president asked. Admiral Carter consulted her tactical display. "At their current speed, 18 hours. They're not hurrying, sir. They want us to see them coming." Defense Secretary Park looked up from her communication station. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 3 of our outer colonies. They want to negotiate separately with the aliens." The president's face showed no emotion, but his hands clenched into fists. "Send a message to all colonies. We stand together or we fall together. No separate negotiations." Meanwhile, aboard the USS Liberty, Captain Morrison was receiving very different messages. His communication officer, Lieutenant Hayes, was monitoring transmissions from locations that did not appear on any official star charts. "Captain, I'm receiving confirmation signals from all 17 stations," Hayes reported. His voice was calm, but Morrison could see the excitement in his eyes. "All report ready and awaiting final authorization." Morrison nodded and walked to the main view screen. In the distance, he could see the alien fleet approaching like a glittering wave of death. Their ships were beautiful and terrible, weapons of war disguised as works of art. "Signal Earth Command," Morrison ordered. "Tell them blackout is fully operational." "Yes, sir," Hayes replied, then paused. "Captain, what exactly is Operation Blackout?" Morrison smiled grimly. "Lieutenant, you're about to find out." Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kethvar was reviewing the final attack plans when his sensor operator called out in alarm. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy readings throughout the human solar system." Kethvar looked up from his tactical display. "Explain." The sensor operator, a young Zephyrian named Vex Carr, checked his instruments twice before responding. "Sir, there are massive power signatures appearing in multiple locations. The readings don't match any known human technology." "Show me," the Admiral ordered. The main display changed to show a map of the human solar system. Red dots appeared scattered throughout the area between the planets. Each dot represented an energy signature larger than anything the humans should have been capable of producing. "Where are these readings coming from?" Kethvar demanded. "Unknown, sir. The signatures are appearing in asteroid fields behind moons in the outer reaches of the system, areas where our initial scans showed nothing." Sub-Commander Yix-Tal moved to her own sensor station and began running detailed scans. "Admiral, these energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. The power output is enormous." Kethvar felt the first stirring of unease. In all his years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, those instincts were telling him that something was very wrong. "Vexcar, how many energy signatures are you detecting?" The young sensor operator worked frantically at his controls. 43 distinct sources, sir, and they're all powering up simultaneously." "That's impossible," Yix-Tal said. "Our intelligence reports showed no major military installations outside the human homeworld area." Admiral Kethvar stood up from his command chair and walked to the main view screen. The human solar system looked exactly as it had in their intelligence reports. A single inhabited world with a few small colonies and mining stations. Nothing that could threaten a Zephyrian. "Fleet, continue scanning," he ordered. "I want to know what we're looking at." As the minutes passed, the energy readings continued to climb. Whatever the humans were powering up, it was using massive amounts of energy. The largest signature was generating more power than a Zephyrian battleship. "Admiral," Vexcar called out, his voice tight with stress, "the energy patterns are reaching critical levels. Sir, I think they're preparing to activate something big." Kethavar's 4 hands gripped the railing in front of the view screen. For the first time in his military career, he was facing a completely unknown situation. Every instinct told him to halt the fleet advance and reassess the threat. But that was impossible. The Third Fleet had never retreated from a primitive species. The Empire's reputation for invincibility depended on their ability to intimidate younger races into submission. "All ships, maintain course and speed," he ordered. "We proceed as planned." But even as he gave the command, Admiral Kethvar could not shake the feeling that he was leading his fleet into a trap. The humans had seemed so primitive, so helpless. Their ships were small and their technology was basic. So why were they not afraid? Captain Morrison received the final status report as the alien fleet crossed the orbit of Mars. Every hidden facility was fully powered and ready. Systems that had been built in secret over the past 50 years were coming online for the first time. "Captain," reported his engineer, Kim Santos, "all stealth generators are holding steady. The aliens still can't see our real fleet." Morrison nodded. For decades, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Not the moment when they would meet aliens, but the moment when those aliens would prove to be hostile. Earth's greatest scientists and engineers had worked in secret, building weapons and ships that officially did not exist. The small patrol ships and cargo vessels that the aliens had observed were real, but they were not humanity's only fleet. They were not even humanity's main fleet. "Lieutenant Hayes," Morrison said, "signal all hidden stations. Operation Blackout is now active." As Hayes sent the final authorization code, 43 massive vessels began decloaking throughout the solar system. Each one had been hidden behind stealth technology that bent light and blocked sensors. Each one was larger and more heavily armed than anything the aliens had ever encountered. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing horror as his sensor displays exploded with new contacts. Ships were appearing everywhere, materializing out of empty space like ghosts becoming solid. The largest one was over a mile long, bristling with weapons that his computers could not identify. "How?" he whispered. Sub-Commander Yixtal stared at her instruments in disbelief. "Admiral, we've been deceived. The humans have a hidden fleet. A big one." Kethvar looked at the tactical display and felt something he had not experienced since he was a young officer in his first battle. Fear. The humans had not just hidden their ships, they had hidden their true nature. The United Nations Emergency Assembly Hall had never been so quiet. President Chen Wei stood at the main podium, looking out at the faces of Earth's most important leaders. They had been debating for 18 straight hours, and still no one could agree on what humanity should do. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others demanded they fight no matter what the cost. A few suggested trying to negotiate or buy more time. But everyone knew the truth. In less than 50 hours, they had to give Admiral Kethvar an answer that would decide the future of the human race. "The alien commander has agreed to meet with one of our representatives," announced Defense Secretary Helen Park. Her voice was hoarse from hours of talking. "Neutral ground. Jupiter Station." A murmur went through the assembly hall. Jupiter Station was a small research facility that orbited the giant planet. It was far from Earth, but still within human space. At least the aliens were willing to talk face to face. Admiral Lisa Carter stood up from her seat. "I volunteer to go, Mr. President. This is a military matter." President Chen Wei shook his head. "Thank you, Admiral, but they specifically asked to meet with someone who represents human military capability. They want to talk to a ship captain, not an administrator." All eyes turned to the main screen where Captain Jake Morrison appeared via video link from the USS Liberty. He was still out near Pluto watching the alien fleet. His brown hair was messy and his uniform looked like he had slept in it. "Captain Morrison," the president said, "are you willing to represent humanity in this meeting?" Morrison looked tired, but his voice was steady. "Yes, sir. I'll do whatever is needed." "Then God help us all," whispered someone in the back of the hall. 2 days later, Captain Morrison stood in the main docking bay of Jupiter Station. The facility was small, designed for scientific research, not diplomatic meetings. But it was. the only neutral location both sides could agree on. Through the large windows, Morrison could see the alien escort ship approaching. It was smaller than the massive warships in their main fleet, but it was still 3 times the size of any human vessel. The ship's crystal hull caught the light from Jupiter and threw rainbow patterns across the station walls. Station Commander Patricia Wells stood next to Morrison. She was nervous, constantly checking her watch and adjusting her uniform. "Captain, are you sure about this? We don't know anything about their biology or their customs. What if you accidentally insult them?" Morrison looked out at the approaching ship. "Commander, I don't think they care much about our customs. This isn't a diplomatic meeting, it's a surrender negotiation." The alien ship docked with a soft vibration that Morrison felt through the station floor. The docking bay filled with a sweet smell, like flowers mixed with metal. A section of the alien hull became transparent, and a figure stepped through. Admiral Kethvar was impressive in person. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that reflected the station lights. His 4 arms moved with fluid grace, and his yellow eyes studied Morrison with obvious intelligence. When he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that somehow made the translation device unnecessary. "Captain Morrison, I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Morrison extended his hand in the traditional human greeting. After a moment, Admiral Kethvar reached out with one of his 4 hands and carefully shook it. The alien's skin felt warm and slightly rough, like leather that had been left in the sun. "Admiral, thank you for coming. Shall we find somewhere private to talk?" They moved to the station's main conference room, a simple space with a metal table and chairs designed for humans. Admiral Kethvar had to duck slightly to fit through the doorway, and he chose to stand rather than try to use the furniture. "Captain Morrison, let me be direct," the Admiral began. "Your species is very young and very alone. The galaxy contains threats that you cannot imagine. We offer protection and guidance in exchange for your cooperation." Morrison had prepared for this conversation during the 2-day journey to Jupiter Station. "What kind of cooperation, Admiral?" "Standard client species arrangement. You maintain your own government for local matters, but we handle all foreign policy and military affairs. You provide resources when requested and follow our trade agreements. In return, we protect you from the Crimson Horde, the Machine Collective, and other powers that would destroy you." The alien admiral touched a device on his belt, and holographic images appeared in the air between them. Morrison saw scenes of massive battles between different alien races. Ships the size of cities fired weapons that could crack moons. Entire solar systems burned in wars that had lasted for centuries. These are the forces that rule the galaxy, Captain. Without our protection, your species will encounter one of them eventually. And when that happens, you will not be offered a choice. Morrison studied the images carefully. The destruction was beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Planets turned to glass, stars going dark. Billions of lives ended in moments. "And if we refuse your offer?" Admiral Kethvar's expression did not change. "Then we will be forced to take direct control for your own protection. Your ships will be disabled, your government placed under our supervision, and your military disbanded. It is not ideal, but it is better than extinction." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Earth with its blue oceans and white clouds. He thought about the human colonies on Mars and Europa and Titan. Millions of people living their lives, raising families, building futures. "Admiral, I need to ask you something. How many species have you made this offer to?" 17, including yours. "And how many chose to resist?" 1. Morrison felt his stomach tighten. "What happened to them?" "They changed their minds after we demonstrated our capabilities on one of their cities." The human captain looked out the conference room window at Jupiter's swirling clouds. Somewhere beyond those clouds, 47 alien warships waited for his answer. Each one carried enough firepower to level a continent. Admiral, may I send a message to my government before giving you our final answer? Of course. You have 22 of your hours remaining. Morrison activated his communication device and sent a coded message to Earth Command. The message was simple. 3 words that would trigger protocols established years ago by people who had planned for this exact situation. Blackout is authorized. Within minutes, confirmation signals began arriving from 17 different locations across the solar system, hidden bases that officially did not exist, secret facilities that had been built far from Earth's watching eyes, projects that had consumed vast amounts of resources and manpower. Morrison turned back to Admiral Kethvar, who was studying his own communication device with growing interest. "Admiral," Morrison said politely, "I have Earth's official response to your offer." The alien looked up from his device. His yellow eyes showed mild curiosity, but no concern. After all, what could this primitive species possibly do against the might of the Zephyrian Empire? "Speak, Captain Morrison." Morrison looked directly into those yellow eyes and spoke clearly. "Admiral, with all due respect, we decline your offer. For the first time since the meeting began, Admiral Kethvar showed surprise. His scaled features shifted slightly, and 2 of his 4 hands made gestures that Morrison did not understand. "Captain, I do not believe you fully comprehend your situation. Our fleet contains sufficient firepower to sterilize your homeworld. Your largest vessels are smaller than our maintenance craft." Morrison nodded calmly. "I understand perfectly, Admiral. Humanity's answer is still no." The alien admiral stared at him for a long moment. In 60 years of military service, only one species had initially refused his offer, and they had reconsidered very quickly once they understood the consequences. "Very well, Captain Morrison. You have given me your answer. I will relay it to my fleet commanders." As Admiral Kethvar prepared to leave, Morrison spoke once more. "Admiral, there is one thing you should know." "What is that, Captain?" Morrison smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Humanity has been preparing for this day for a very long time. Captain Jake Morrison had been in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like what appeared on his main screen that Tuesday morning. One moment the stars looked normal, and the next moment 47 massive ships materialized, out of nowhere near the edge of the solar system. The USS Liberty was a small patrol vessel, barely 300 feet long. Morrison and his crew of 47 humans had been doing a routine check of the outer planets when the alien fleet arrived. Now they sat in their tiny ship, staring at vessels that made their own look like a rowboat next to an aircraft carrier. "Captain," said Lieutenant Bobby Hayes from the communications station. His voice was steady, but Morrison could hear the tension underneath. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from all those ships. Their smallest vessel is 20 times our size." Morrison stood up from his command chair and walked to the main view screen. The alien ships were beautiful in a terrifying way. They looked like they were made of crystal and metal, with hulls that bent and reflected starlight into rainbow colors. Each ship was smooth and elegant, clearly built by a civilization far more advanced than humanity. "Any response to our standard greeting?" Morrison asked. "Nothing yet, sir," Hayes replied, "but they're definitely scanning us. I can feel their sensors running over our hull." Navigator Danny Walsh looked up from his station. "Captain, those ships just appeared out of hyperspace. They didn't use any jump points or gates. They just materialized." Morrison nodded. That was technology humanity did not have. Human ships needed to use specific jump points to travel faster. Then light. These aliens could apparently appear anywhere they wanted. "Sir," called out Engineer Kim Santos from the back of the bridge, "I'm reading their power output. Each of those big ships is generating more energy than our entire home fleet, combined." Before Morrison could respond, the communication board lit up with an incoming signal. Hayes quickly routed it to the main speakers. The voice that came through was strange, musical, but clearly speaking English. "Human vessel. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. You will maintain your current position and await further instructions. Morrison looked around at his crew. They all stared back at him, waiting for his response. These were good people, experienced spacers who had faced pirates and asteroids and equipment failures. But none of them had ever faced anything like this. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran vessel Liberty," he replied. "Welcome to our solar system, Admiral. How may we assist you?" There was a long pause before the alien voice responded. "Captain Morrison, you and your species will receive an official communication within 1 of your hours. Prepare your leadership for an important announcement." The signal cut off, leaving the bridge of the Liberty in silence. 3 hours later, every major leader on Earth sat in emergency session. President Chen Wei looked tired as he read the message that had been transmitted to every government and military facility on the planet. The words were simple and direct. "People of Earth, this is Admiral Kethvar, commander of the 3rd Fleet of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species has achieved faster than light travel and has therefore attracted our attention. We offer you a choice. Submit to the protection and guidance of the Zephyrian Empire, or face the consequences of your continued independence. You have 72 hours to provide your answer." The message had included images of the alien fleet and technical data showing their capabilities. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a continent. Together, they could turn Earth into a dead rock floating in space. Defense Secretary Helen Park spoke first. "Our entire space navy consists of 23 ships. Most of them are explorers and cargo vessels. We have maybe 12 ships that could be called true warships, and they're scattered across 3 star systems." Admiral Lisa Carter, commander of Earth's orbital defense platforms, added her assessment. "Even if we called back every ship and concentrated our entire fleet, we would be outnumbered 4 to 1. And that's not counting the massive technology advantage they clearly have." President Chen Wei looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some looked angry, others frightened. Most just looked tired. Humanity had spent the last century exploring space and building colonies on other worlds. They had focused on science and trade, not war. "What do we know about these Zephyrians?" the president asked. Intelligence Director Gary Moore opened a file on his tablet. "Not much, sir. Our computer systems have been analyzing their transmission. The language patterns suggest they've had contact with multiple species. This isn't their first time making this kind of offer." "And what happened to the others?" "Unknown, sir. But the fact that they're speaking English and know our communication protocols suggests they've been watching us for some time." Back on the Liberty, Captain Morrison received new orders from Earth Command. All military vessels were to take defensive positions around Earth and the major colonies. They were not to engage the alien fleet unless directly attacked. Morrison read the orders twice before calling his senior staff together in the ship's small briefing room. Chief Engineer Santos, Navigator Walsh, Communications Officer Hayes, and Security Chief Ryan Bell crowded around the metal table. "Earth Command wants us to head back to Luna Station," Morrison began. "We're to join the defensive fleet and wait." "Wait for what?" asked Bell. "For them to decide whether to blow us up or enslave us?" Santos shook her head. "Maybe they're not as bad as they seem. Maybe this protection they're offering is real." "Protection from what?" Walsh countered. "We've been in space for 2 centuries and we've never encountered any serious threats." Hayes looked up from his communication equipment. "Sir, I've been monitoring their transmissions. They're not trying to hide their conversations from us. I think they want us to know how powerful they are." Morrison considered this. It made sense. From a military perspective, if you wanted someone to surrender without a fight, you made sure they understood exactly how hopeless resistance would be. "What's your assessment of their technology?" he asked Santos. "Way beyond ours, Captain. Their power systems alone are probably 50 years ahead of anything we have." And those hulls look like they're made of some kind of crystal metal composite we've never seen. Morrison stood up and walked to the small porthole that looked out into space. He could see some of the alien ships in the distance, their crystal hulls reflecting sunlight like jewels. They were beautiful, but they represented the end of human independence. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "there's something else. I intercepted a coded transmission from Earth Command about an hour ago. I think they're planning something." Morrison turned back to his crew. "What kind of something?" "I'm not sure, sir. But the transmission went out to 17 different locations, across the solar system, places we don't have any official bases." Before Morrison could respond, his communication board buzzed with an incoming priority message from Earth Command. The orders were brief and coded, but the meaning was clear. Operation Blackout was now authorized.